So good. Hello, I do. Do I look like Brittany?
You do, totally.
With hair?
Totally.
How are y'all? I'm gonna put this here. Oops, I knew something like that was gonna happen. All right, there are so many of y'all in here. And that was a perfect song to bring me up because my palms are so sweaty and my legs are so shaky. And that's not written in here, so it's legit. But that was good affirmation for how we all feel. And so if you missed the last Sparkle event, it sucks because Stacy brought this great message. Yeah, that's not written either. This is all the Holy Spirit. She gave this great message about, if you know Stacy Corbin, you know that she says whatever the Holy Spirit puts on her mind. She has no qualms about being honest and affirming, and she stood up here and she did that, and she talked about the aroma, the fragrance of Christ, and that's what we as ladies are supposed to leave in the room. She said it much better than that. But that was, I'm just telling you, it sucks if you missed it. You shouldn't miss any of these. So she gave this message about the fragrance of Christ, and she started off the message by saying, I pray that the beginning of 2018 has been amazing for you. So I'm going to start it different. And I'm going to start it off by saying, what if it hasn't? What if this year has been the worst year ever for you? Or at the very least, can we say that we're far enough into 2018 that we've all walked through something that hasn't smelled like roses? So maybe you haven't walked through it yet, but it's probably coming. You're standing on one side and the water is so wide and treacherous that you can't even see the other side. So that's what we're going to talk about. The title of this message is Crossing the Jordan, whether you like it or not. Don't leave. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. Stacy was all light and flowery, and I'm talking about stuff that stinks. The point of this message is not to make you feeling worse than when you got here. In fact, it's to encourage you and to give you fuel and hope, to keep you going in spite of the tough stuff, and to remind you that that's not all that life has for us. There's so much beauty in the space between the hard times, and it's there that we learn to put our focus on Jesus and to lean into God's purpose for us. And we have hope that's not based on our own strength, but hope that's based on God's strength. But there is someone that wants us to forget that. And he wants us to think that we're all alone and that no one else cares what we're going through, or no one else cares about the details that are happening in our lives. There's an enemy, and if he can get in our mind and isolate us, we can do all the hard work for him. So my prayer as I was preparing for this has been that when I stand up here, whatever I say, whatever might come out, points you to Jesus tonight. So what I want to do is the message and the vision that God gave me. I act like I've been preparing for this forever, but honestly, I just printed this morning, so I don't really know exactly what we're going to talk about. I do kind of, but the main idea is comparison. Comparison is something that we all struggle with. It's something that has been heavy on me lately. So I don't know why God would tell me to talk about it, because I don't feel like I have it all figured out. But comparison and then flipping that and finding your purpose in life. And it's not to compare ourselves to one another. So I want to do something to kind of level the playing field to start off. So I want everyone to stand up. Guys don't have to stand up because some of this isn't even going to pertain. I'm going to read a short list to you. And when I'm done reading, if you can relate to anything that I say, stay standing. I'm going to read you a group of things before I want you to either decide if you're going to stand or sit. So if nothing applies to you, you can sit. Make sense? Sorta? Okay, we're going to do a practice round. But I'm going to read you a group of things because I want you to feel safe participating in this activity honestly. So here's the practice run. Okay, I'm going to read you a group. If it pertains to you, you stay standing up. If you got it all figured out, sit down. Okay, so if you've ever been ditched by mean girls, if you have a fear of connecting with other women, if you're afraid to pray out loud, if you know you talk too much and you don't listen enough, or if you've ever been paralyzed by fear. So remain standing if you can relate to any of those things, and if you have conquered all that, sit down. Okay, so far so good. Let's do another one. Okay, if you never finished school, if your utilities have ever been cut off, if you're a workaholic, if you've had an illness that's affected your life, or if you hate your job or question your career choice. Anyone want to sit? No? Okay, let's go deeper. If you have ever personally been affected by divorce, infidelity, infertility, miscarriage, teen pregnancy, molestation, loss of a child, or been in an abusive relationship, remain standing. If not, sit down. Okay. Now, if you've ever felt unworthy of love, overcome by shame, if you felt abandoned, discarded, or betrayed, if you felt like an orphan, if you feel like you don't know your identity, or if you have body issues. You don't want to sit? Nope. Okay, last one. If you alter your image in any way, if you dye your hair, if you wear makeup, if you have eyelash extensions, if you've had plastic surgery, if you stuff your bra, if you wear Spanx, if you filter your photos on Instagram, if you have tattooed eyeliner, if you pluck random hairs. All right. You're all in this together? Okay, you can sit down. Thank you for indulging that. I didn't know how it would work. So I had you start standing up rather than sitting down. Think about it. If you were sitting, how much harder would it have been to be the first one standing when I said, if you've ever felt abandoned or betrayed? No one wants to be the first one standing up for that, even though you all stood. Wasn't it easier to stand when you know everyone else was already standing with you? Notice I never sat down either. I know all of those categories, sometimes multiple things in those categories, and I know how hard some of that stuff is. But you know who really knows? Jesus. He knows our hurt and our betrayal and our condemnation better than anyone ever could. And it's because he proved himself over and over again, and people still doubted him. He knew he would be betrayed, but he loved anyways. He never once sinned, but he took the punishment for all of the sin in the world, for every wrong thing that would happen. So when the people in our lives fail us, and they might, he's the only one that will always be faithful. I think it's scientifically proven, if there's any scientists in the room, you can contradict if I'm not correct, but redheads have more of like a fight in them, and I am a redhead. So I'm good at fighting back. And the first time I really remember fighting back after I had been rejected, I was in 5th grade. At this elementary school that I went to, there was this huge concrete area, and it went up against the school building, and we played games. We played Butts Up and Foursquare. Those are so 90s. But I was really good at those games. And then there was a field next to it where you could play kickball. I was not so good at kickball. But our teacher, she made us rotate games. You couldn't just play Foursquare all the time if you were good at Foursquare. I guess that was like to get us out of our shell and make us try new things. But I did not want to play kickball because I was never good at kickball, and I got really self-conscious when I was on kickball. Nobody wanted me on their team when it was kickball time. I wasn't any good. And pretty much every time it was time for the team captains to pick, you're like, okay, I'll pick Shanna, I'll pick Melinda. I was always the last one picked. And I only got picked because my teacher said I had to play kickball. So they knew that, like, somebody was going to get stuck with me. So one day, the team captain that got stuck with me picked me last, made a very obvious remark about how he would rather be short a player than have me on his team. I know, isn't that so rude? That's devastating for a 10-year-old. But I thought, I may not be good at kickball, but I will show him what I'm good at. So I walked up to him, I called him a name that I will not repeat, and I punched him in the face. I figured if he was going to be disappointed in my kickball skills, he would remember my boxing skills. So, thank you. So in high school, I had a really serious boyfriend. I was serious about him. He was serious about keeping his options open. We dated off and on for a few years, and for a little while I thought maybe he's the one and he just doesn't know it yet. I loved really hard. As far as I knew, we were in a committed relationship, but one night I found out that he had been cheating on me with the girl that I had introduced him to. She was new to the school, and I was trying to be nice and include her in our circle of friends, so I invited her to do things with us, and they took it a step further and got closer than I was expecting. I think that was the first time that I can remember being truly heartbroken. The next day at school, he and I ran into each other in the hallway, and in front of everyone, he said that I was making up lies to keep him from the other girl. So you know what I did? I punched him right in the face. My mom is here, and I am not lying about any of this stuff. If he was going to choose another girl over me, it was going to be a painful decision for him. So I'm not saying that this is the correct response to either of those situations, but I am saying that in both of those situations, comparison is what caused me to respond. In 5th grade, I was comparing myself to the other players on the field, and in high school, I found myself being constantly compared to other girls. I've even found myself comparing myself to someone that I didn't want to be anything like. We do that, don't we? We ask ourselves, am I better than her or worse than her? We might never say those exact words out loud, because who would say that out loud to someone? But we do try to determine if we are inferior or superior to the person we're standing next to. James 3:16 says, where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and every evil practice. Or in the New King James Version, it's a little different. Proverbs 14:30 says, I was going to read it from that one, but I'll do it. A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. How easy is it for envy to pop up when someone else has found favor that we think should be ours? Comparison causes that. What do I mean by that? Well, think about it. If something good happens to someone else, does it bother you? Like, you hear someone's great aunt died and left them $1 million. Are you genuinely happy for them? Or do you think, well, why can't my great aunt die? Don't lie. This is nothing new. Comparison itself is not evil. Comparison with selfish ambition is evil. And it's happened since the very beginning. Satan got Adam and Eve to compare themselves to God in the garden. Jacob's household was full of strained relationships because of Rachel and Leah's comparison. The favor of Joseph over his brothers caused so much envy and jealousy that his brothers threw him in a well and left him for dead. That's all just in the first book. This kind of comparison is still happening to us today. It's a lack of acceptance of who God made us to be. Someone else will always have a nicer house, cleaner kids, a better paying job. But God gave us a clear example of what and who to compare ourselves to in 1 Peter verses 2:21 through 23. It says, "To this you are called because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his footsteps, who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten or punch people in the face, but he committed himself to him who judges righteously." So how do we do it? How do we change the focus of our thoughts when it's all around us? Certainly not in our own strength, right? We have to learn to trust. And I know some of you cringe at that word because you've been hurt and betrayed and let down. But I'm not asking you to trust people first. I'm asking you to trust Jesus first. Matthew 11:28. "Come to me, all you who are labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Oh, sorry, I kept going on my script. "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So you know when I have found this easiest to do, to lean wholeheartedly, completely, dependently on God? It's not at first, usually. Usually it's when I've been fighting so hard to fix everything myself, and I just mess things up even more. I hate to admit how much that sounds like a last resort. So I started off by saying, what if this year has been the worst of your life? And for me, this is true. The beginning of January started off bad and it went downhill from there. I can honestly say I've never experienced such lows as I have at the beginning of this year. I know you're looking at me and you're thinking, well, she's so young and vibrant. How could she ever have anything bad happen to her? And that's true. I am young and vibrant, but I've been through some stuff. And the enemy knew that I was up to something, and he did everything he could to make me stumble and to get distracted and discouraged. But that's what we need to remember, that people are not the enemy. The enemy is the enemy, and he's going to use what he can to get to you, and he studies you, and he knows what he can use to get to you. So you know what you need to do? Punch him in the face. God has a plan and a purpose for your life. So does the enemy. Which one are you going to walk into? If you have your Bible, turn to the book of Joshua, or we'll have it on the screen too. But at the very beginning of the book, we see Joshua stepping into his purpose. So I'm going to read verses 1 through 9. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, "Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give to them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, from the great river to the Euphrates and all the Hittite country, to the great sea on the west. No one will be able to stand up against you all the days of your life. And I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their forefathers to give them. Be strong and be very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave to you. Do not turn from it to the right or the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? He says it again. Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So Moses, the Israelites' leader, had just died, but they kind of weren't expecting it. He was 120 years old, but it does say that he still had good sight and he was still really strong. And so they were expecting to have Moses around for a little bit longer. Joshua was his aide. He had been mentored by Moses for almost 40 years. And Joshua at this time was training to be a warrior. So Joshua thought that he was training to be a bodyguard, a fighter. He might have been redhead. But as he spent time with Moses and he saw Moses' interactions with God, his spirituality and his leadership skills were developed. And this happens to us, and sometimes it's how we can sell ourselves short, because we think that our purpose is one thing, but God's only using that time to train us for something much bigger. And so when Moses died and the Lord called Joshua into his purpose, Joshua had to respond. He had a choice. We all have a choice in how we respond to transitions in our lives, whether they're good or bad. And so basically Joshua responded and he was like, all right. So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your supplies ready. 3 days from now, you'll cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving to you for your own. I mean, what was he going to say? God basically told him exactly what to do, how to do it. He didn't really leave any details out. So who would disobey such blatant direction, right? Y'all don't even nod your heads, because I'm not going to look anyone in the eyes, but I know some of you most definitely have heard directly from God and decided against what he said. Decided against packing up and walking towards the Jordan because what might or might not be on the other side is too unfamiliar, much less considering the destination it's even going to take to get there. So ladies, remember that when you're called to cross the Jordan while you're deciding what to do, there's often an audience. People are watching your situation. People are watching how you're going to respond to it, and they're considering that. God told Joshua that he would be the one to lead the Israelites into the promised land. We know that this is a big deal because we have the whole story, we have the Bible, but most of the people in the nation of Israel had been roaming the desert for 40 years. And for some, that was all they had ever known. So it was familiar and it was comfortable. God had something so much better for them if they had just taken that step, if they would just take that step, if they would just pack up and walk in that direction towards the Jordan. So normally the Jordan is about 100 feet wide. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that treacherous, but they weren't called to walk it during the normal time. They were called to walk during harvest time when it was basically flooded. The water was rushing and the river was much wider, much more treacherous. So does this maybe sound familiar to anyone? Like, okay, yeah, God, I'll follow you through the water, but why couldn't we have done this during drought season? Why did we have to wait until after the flood? So the nation of Israel, they headed that way. And as they were walking, they were believing that God would do a miracle even before they saw any signs of a miracle. And that's it. That's the ultimate picture of faith. Sometimes we're called to cross a treacherous river that we don't really want to cross. But if you walk towards it and trust that God has a plan, He'll show you the victory in it. He'll part the water and He will do all of the hard work for us. All you have to do is dip your toe in, but sometimes that's still just so hard. So He's telling them in Joshua 3:13 that as soon as the priest carrying the ark of the Lord set foot in the water will be cut off. He's clear in that. And it did. And verse 15 says, "Now the Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest. Yet as soon as the priest who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing, just like He said. Then the priest stood there on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan while the whole nation of Israel walked into their promise." Now listen, they didn't all cross at once. There was a lot of people. It was a big river. So some people got there first. It would be like if everyone in Austin was called to cross Lake Austin at one time, Lake Travis. It would take a little bit. Some people would get there first and they would be excited and encouraging the people behind to come on over, but the ones who hadn't started walking yet might be scared. They don't know what's over there or what they're walking into. They may not be in the best situation, but on this side of the river, it's familiar. They know their territory. They know their kids' favorite places to play on that side of the river. They know the best restaurants on that side of the river. God's calling us to our promise, but sometimes we're stuck on the familiar side of the river. He never intended for the nation of Israel to take 40 years to cross the desert, to roam the desert. That 40-year trip should have only taken about 11 days. And the same thing happens to us still. God has a plan for us and we take the long route, but that's okay. Sometimes God has to tell you that He didn't plan it that way. He didn't cause it, but He's not going to waste it and He'll use it anyways. So you have to learn His voice. You have to know when it's God talking to you. You have to be familiar. So when God tells you to keep that baby, even though you're only 15, He'll take care of it. Or He's telling you to stay in a marriage that's marked by infidelity because He's going to use that to reach other marriages and change generations of families. Or He tells you that whatever the doctor said about those blood test results, it's not your destiny. And that's something that He's going to use to get you to your destiny and bring other people with you. Ladies, the faith of one woman can change a whole household. So don't be discouraged when you feel like you're stuck on this side of the river. 1 Peter 3:4 says that our beauty, the real unfading beauty that comes from a gentle and quiet spirit, is of great worth in God's eyes. I know some of your hearts might have started beating fast when I said gentle and quiet. Remember, I'm the girl who never got in trouble. I was really good. I really was really good, except when I had to punch someone in the face to get my message across. But we can learn. Gentle and quiet does not mean weak and pitiful. Gentle means humble, strength under control. Seriously, it takes a whole lot more strength to be meek and gentle when you feel like a strong right hook could get your message across just as easily. And being quiet is being unbothered and undisturbed. So have you ever been in a situation where you're about to let someone have it? And it's even better if there's people around so they can see you let that person have it. But then you remember that everyone has smartphones and YouTube and the internet, and this is not how you want to become an overnight sensation. So you hold it in, You know this is not the time or the place, and if you let it out, there might be consequences that you didn't count on. So I'm not saying that being gentle and quiet is easy, but it does something to the environment around you. The Israelites didn't cross the Jordan and then just start feasting on milk and honey. God told them to do something first. In chapter 4, he had Joshua gather 12 men, one from each tribe, and take up 12 stones out of the middle of the riverbed and set up a memorial where the waters had been parted. He wanted a visual to remember that even though they may have taken the long way, their time had not been wasted and their promise had been fulfilled. He wanted a sign that would make their children ask questions, and when they asked, they could tell their children what God had done, and that story could pass on and on and on every time somebody passed that memorial. So that's part of it too. You have to tell your story. You have a story. I'm young and vibrant, and I already have a story. I know you have a story. Don't put others down while you're telling the story or tell their side of it. But your testimony is what God uses. It's the visual of the 12 stones on the good side of the Jordan, the visual of what God has done in your life and can do in all of our lives. And he can do anything. No job is too big or too small. He cares about every little detail in your life, even though sometimes it might not feel like it. That's the enemy telling you. That's why it's important to learn those voices. So he cares about every detail. So for the last 10 years or so, I have been on an adult kickball team. Slow your roll, don't get too excited. I'm still not that good. I'm not any good at all, actually. They just keep me because, I don't know, I guess I'm fun. Or because they need my husband to play. I'm still last on the lineup. I've only gotten out a handful of people in the last decade. And a couple of years ago, during tournaments, our coach even asked me to sit out during the first game to help our team's chances of winning and moving on. Y'all are laughing, but I think that was really rude. My feelings were so hurt from that rejection. I didn't punch him in the face. Thank you. I'm learning. I didn't punch him in the face. I have learned that while that does leave an impression on people, you can't just go around punching them. I cried because my feelings were hurt. And then I prayed against those feelings and I asked God to handle it and to vindicate me in a way that only he could. And so they lost the game. Anyways, without me. You just gotta ask God for what you want, and he's gonna take care of it. So while I still struggle with it almost daily, that's something that I hope to be able to put on my rock on the altar, is rejection and abandonment. So I want you all to think about what your river is. Has God taken you through something? Or now are you on the other side of the river encouraging people to come on over, to walk through it, that it's okay on this side? Are you in the middle of the river trying to catch up with the ones that are already in the land of milk and honey? Are you being pushed towards the water's edge? And God's saying, just dip your toe in and I'll take care of the rest. You might even be thinking, I can't swim. I'm not going anywhere near that river. Here's the deal. We all get to cross the Jordan. It's not a punishment. It's a promise. And remember, you're not crossing alone. The people, your people, are crossing with you. And there is someone who goes before you, and it's Jesus. So now I want you to do something. On your table, there's a rock. And at your table for just a couple minutes, I want you to pray and to communicate to just your small group, the ladies at your table, what your river is. You may be already on the other side of it. You may be in the middle of it. Somebody may be just pushing you towards it. But I want you to think about what your river is, what your Jordan is. And then when y'all have decided, you can each cast that on that stone. And then the strongest person at your table can bring the rock up. And I want you to build a little altar right about here. And then we'll pray it out. So I'll give y'all a couple minutes to do that. Thanks. No, they all went. They all went ahead of time. Like they were as worship was happening, there was a slow trickle, and some people yeah that way too. Yeah,
I'm like seriously, like,
you're safe.
we supposed to write what we talked about on this?
You can.
Okay.
You don't have to. We're just gonna stack them and build.
Okay.
Darby, if you want to. Yeah, let me go be the strong one in our group.
That's right.
Not only that, they had a stand
One-handed.
You're the strongest one? Yes, Becky, I'm the strongest one. Oh, you're the strongest one at your table.
Stack it up.
Look, it has like a wait a
about halfway there with our altar. So bring your rocks up. Thanks.
What do you want me to do with this?
Build it. Put it wherever you want it, yeah.
Do you?
Do you want to? All right, is that all the rocks? Are there any rocks out still? Any stragglers? All right, so here it is. Here's your altar. Oh, last. Save the best for last. Yeah, there is your altar. All right, so let's close it out. Lord, I just want to thank you for what you do in our lives. I just want to thank you for never leaving us alone and always walking beside us. And when we feel like we're on the wrong side of the river, God, you're there encouraging us to just dip our toe in. And so I just ask that you bless each of these ladies in their situations as we see we're all in this together. No one really is alone. That's just a trick. And so I just ask that you continuously remind us of that, and you continuously remind us that you're standing right beside us, and every step we take, you're right there with us. And when we get to the other side, God, you're gonna build something that people can see and that can be used, and that's gonna speak to generations, God. And we're not going in the wrong direction. We're following you, and even if we take the long way, you're not going to abandon us or leave us there on the wrong path. You're going to pull us back in, and we will enter into our promise for you. So I just ask that you bless these ladies as they go home, and bless their week, and just give them the confirmation and the affirmation that they're seeking from you and from no one else, from not from people, but that they know that when they feel like they're not getting what they want from the people around them, their jobs, their homes, God, that they seek it from you. So I thank you for this building and this opportunity to just get together. And I pray that everyone gets home safe. Amen. Yes, you
I'm going to
can.
pray for Mora. If you want to reach your hand out and just pray over her, that'd be awesome. Lord, thank you so much for my sweet, sweet sister, God. Thank you for her heart, Lord, and just her kindness and her compassion, Father. I pray that you would bless her, God, just rejuvenate her. She poured into us, God. I pray that you would just pour into her tenfold, God. Bless her this week, Lord. I pray that you would just give her a peace and a joy that passes all understanding, God. And thank you for this mighty woman of God, Lord. Continue to build her, continue to love on her and just hold her in your arms, Lord. And take her where you want her to go, God. We love you and we bless you. And thank you, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.